Well, we got that Buc-ee's coming up to KCK, right? Next year or 2027, I think it'll actually open up. Well, on the other side of state line, they're going with a Wally's. It's going to be off Nolan Road, and the Independence City Council approved this plan last month, just off of the intersection of I-70, John.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it used to be. I think guys were telling me the Venture store there.
That's going to be good. I'm all about it, man. We got a war of major gas station stops coming to Kansas City.
I'm going to go out to Buc-ee's and get a brisket sandwich and see if I can finish it before I get to Wally, and then see what they've got.
You'll see John licking his fingers as he's driving down the road.
If they're out, I'll hit a fillet of fish.
Yeah.
Way,
you had to go there. You had to go there. Oh, gosh. Way to ruin people's breakfast. Let's go to David Stokes. He's with the Show Me Institute on KCMO Talk Radio. So Wally's and Buc-ee's are going to be competing here in the Kansas City area, but something's got David Stokes all hot and bothered. Good morning, David. What is it?
Good morning, Pete. Great to be on the air with you. Right. I love the idea of competition and new entrants into the market. And finally, gas stations can solve Kansas City's problem of nobody having anywhere to buy gas to drive around. But, seriously, does Independence really need to give Wally's $7 million in a tip and create 2 new special taxing districts to subsidize what is nothing more than a big gas station? They have gas stations in Independence. This isn't solving some giant need. The idea that Independence would not learn its lesson from the Bass Pro debacle of 15 or so years ago and continue to repeat this misstep is just infuriating.
Explain to people what exactly a TIF is.
Well, a TIF, tax increment financing, which we've discussed on the show many times, but as a reminder, it's just a subsidy. It's a tax incentive where a development comes in and they set a baseline. So let's say they're paying $10,000 in property taxes for a commercial lot. And then after the development, they would owe $20,000 in property taxes. Well, they get to keep that additional $10,000, that $10,000 increment. Instead of going to the school districts and the county and the cities and whatever, it gets to go back to the developer for certain allowed costs. So they get to keep 100% of the increase in property taxes and 50% of the increase in sales taxes. And so that is why cities often pass TIFs, even though the overall effect is negative financially, because cities might benefit because the school district, the fire district, whoever, they don't get sales taxes. So a city looks at it and says, well, we'll get half the new sales taxes, which were, if it was a vacant lot or just an office building, that was zero. But now it'll be a Buc-ee's or a Wally's in this case, and that'll be a lot for the city. So the school district, the county, everybody else gets hurt in this sort of race to the bottom, but the city sort of comes out ahead, at least in their own very short-term thinking. They don't really come out ahead. That's Independence's experience with Bass Pro 15, 20 years ago showed that, where they had a disastrous TIF that didn't meet their projections and put the city on the hook for millions of dollars of payments they didn't think they'd have to make. I hope that doesn't happen here, but the idea that you'd be subsidizing a gas station with taxpayer money is just absurd.
Yeah, David Stokes is here. It happens all the time. It's not a Democratic issue. It's not a Republican issue. Anybody affiliated with either party in local government loves the idea of these TIFs, and they do it in part because they say, to your point, well, something is better than nothing. If there's not going to be anything on this vacant lot, we might as well make a little bit of sales tax revenue off of it because something is better than nothing. Why is that not the answer?
Well, it's not because oftentimes, first of all, there is something there. So there is something generating taxes and the like. There's so many reasons for it, and we have long studies of this available at showmeinstitute.org. It's bad for a lot of reasons. First of all, it increases government planning of the economy. You really have to believe that these local officials in Independence or wherever, but we're talking about Independence today, can predict the future and say, we think that taxpayer money should go to a private business here instead of a private business over there. And if you're going to believe that this works, you have to believe that they can sort of predict the future better than markets can, better than investors can, better than the economy works on its own. Well, of course, that's insane that the city manager of Independence, the economic development officials of Independence can sort of beat the market and predict how to spend these tax dollars on businesses. They just totally fail in that regard, because oftentimes these decisions are made for politics, for other biases. So that's, one reason. The other thing is it's just a race to a bottom, meaning, sure, they'll say the city might come out ahead, but there's all sorts of examples, such as Bass Pro, not even the city came out ahead. But in other ones, we're sure the short-term effects of the city might be a little more tax revenue from the sales tax. But you get the school district, the county, the fire district, they have to raise taxes on everybody else because that new development brings costs. You have to provide services to that new development, and they don't have the taxes to pay for it.
I know that you guys at the Show Me Institute bang your heads against the wall nonstop on this issue. And it's not meant to be a trick question, but why does no one listen to you guys in any of this stuff?
It's not a trick question. It's a fair question, and it's so frustrating. The main reason is because the incentives are all wrong. What I mean by that, in Independence right now, they're thinking very narrowly. Like the city manager, the city economic development officials, whoever in Independence, their concern is not how is this going to affect the long-term economy of Independence in 20 years. Their concern is, how do I look like I'm doing my job? How do I look like I'm getting new businesses started so that in a couple of years I can move on and get promoted to a bigger, better job in another bigger city around the country? So their incentive is, you said it earlier, to do something. There's this do something mentality to look like they did this program. We did this program. We did this subsidy. It created a new business. So even though all the evidence shows that the effects of these subsidies is negative or it's just no effect at all, meaning businesses would make these decisions anyway, and now you're just giving them a handout. But to the city officials, they want to be seen as doing something. And as for the city council members who approve it in cities throughout Missouri and Kansas and elsewhere, the idea that they are willing to put in the hard work, that they're going to read a dozen economic studies to show the harms that come from this. I've sat in city and county meetings where county officials looked at me and said, hey, I hear what you're saying, but our economic development guy is telling us something different, and we got to believe him. That's why we pay him to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So the incentives are all wrong, and it requires a lot of work and thought and trust in the long term and in trust in capitalism, basically. And as much as people would think that they're capitalists, in the end, they love government planning.
That's a good point. David Stokes, Show Me Institute. All right, David, good job, my man. Thanks for being here as always. We'll see you at the Wally's coming up in a couple of years.
Well, I can't, sure. The popcorn, everything they got is great. I love having 80 new gas stations, I guess, but I just don't know why the taxpayers of Independence are going to be on the hook for this.
Yeah, I get it. Thank you, David. I appreciate you, man. Have a great week.
Thanks, Tito.
There you go. David Stokes on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM.